Your soil is hiding a secret timing mechanism that's about to trigger the most important agricultural deadline of the year. Within the next 7 days, the temperature beneath your garden beds will cross a critical 65-degree threshold. And when it does, 15 essential spring crops will either explode into rapid growth or become completely impossible to cultivate until next spring's conditions return. This thermal checkpoint doesn't care about your planting schedule or good intentions. Each year brings different weather patterns, soil conditions, and seasonal timing that create a unique window of opportunity. Missing this year's optimal conditions means waiting for next year's potentially different thermal patterns to align again. The mechanism that controls this agricultural deadline operates with the precision of industrial machinery. At exactly 65 degrees behind, enzymatic processes within seeds shift from dormancy to active germination, triggering a cascade of cellular reactions that cannot be reversed or delayed. The seed coat undergoes a dramatic transformation at this temperature. Its permeability changes completely, allowing water uptake to begin the irreversible process of germination. Drop below this threshold, and these same seeds face significantly reduced germination rate and compromised development that makes successful harvest unlikely. The cellular machinery inside each seed requires this precise temperature to activate growth hormones and begin protein synthesis. Without this thermal trigger, the biochemical processes remain frozen in a state of suspended animation. Research from agricultural universities demonstrates that seeds exposed to suboptimal temperatures develop compromised root systems that struggle to recover even when conditions improve. The damage occurs at the cellular level during those critical first hours after planting. Root development becomes stunted, nutrient uptake capacity diminishes, and the plant's ability to establish strong foundational growth weakens considerably. This thermal checkpoint operates independently of air temperature, calendar dates, or weather forecasts. Only soil temperature at seed depth matters for triggering germination. You can have perfect spring weather above ground while the soil remains too cool to activate these essential biological processes. The temperature differential between air and soil often spans several degrees, creating a false sense of optimal planting conditions. Missing this window means waiting for next year's planting cycle, as these varieties cannot tolerate the heat stress of late-season sowing. Summer temperatures create hostile conditions that prevent germination entirely or kill emerging seedlings within days of sprouting. The biological programming of spring crops locks them into narrow thermal windows that align with natural seasonal patterns. Agricultural operations treat this thermal data with the same precision as industrial temperature controls in manufacturing facilities. Commercial growers monitor soil temperatures continuously, deploying seeds the moment thermal conditions reach optimal ranges. They understand that germination success depends entirely on hitting precise thermal targets rather than following traditional planting calendars. The water uptake process begins immediately when soil reaches 65 degrees and seed coat permeability increases. Seeds absorb moisture at accelerated rates, swelling as stored starches convert to sugars that fuel initial growth. This hydration process cannot be stopped or slowed once it begins. The seed commits entirely to germination or faces potential failure from soil pathogens that thrive in cool, moist conditions. Understanding this mechanism transforms planting from guesswork into precise agricultural timing based on measurable thermal data. Professional growers rely on soil thermometers rather than weather forecasts or traditional planting dates. They track temperature trends over multiple days to identify the exact moment when thermal conditions stabilize at optimal levels. This knowledge separates successful growers from those who experience poor germination rates year after year. Seeds planted at suboptimal temperatures may show initial signs of sprouting before succumbing to cellular breakdown caused by inadequate thermal conditions. The failure often appears weeks after planting, creating confusion about the actual cause of poor establishment. The thermal lockout mechanism functions as nature's quality control system, ensuring seeds germinate only when environmental conditions support successful plant establishment. The 65-degree threshold represents the temperature at which beneficial growth processes outpace destructive environmental factors like fungal diseases and soil pathogens that flourish in cooler conditions. Temperature monitoring reveals that soil conditions can vary significantly across different garden locations, even within the same property. Raised beds, slope orientation, soil composition, and drainage patterns all influence how quickly soil reaches optimal thermal ranges. Successful growers map these thermal variations to optimize planting timing across their entire growing area. The biological switch operates with mechanical precision because plant survival depends on accurate environmental assessment. Seeds that germinate prematurely face potential death from late-season frost or inadequate growing conditions. Those that delay too long miss the narrow window between optimal soil conditions and summer heat stress that prevents successful establishment. Not all seeds face the same thermal deadline, but certain varieties operate under an unforgiving biological timer that expires within days of optimal conditions. These 15 varieties represent the most time-sensitive crops in your spring garden, each operating under specific thermal requirements that determine success or complete failure. Lettuce varieties demonstrate the precision required for optimal spring production. Butterhead, romaine, and leaf types perform best when soil reaches 65 degrees, though they can germinate at slightly lower temperatures with slower initial development. The tiny seeds demand light exposure for germination and scatter across soil surfaces without covering or receive only the lightest raking. These varieties mature within 1 month of germination when thermal conditions remain stable but can be harvested earlier as baby greens. Iceberg varieties follow similar thermal requirements, developing their characteristic dense heads when planted within optimal temperature ranges. Spring radishes complete their entire life cycle in approximately 3 weeks when soil temperatures remain consistently within the 65 degree to 70 degree range. These exceptionally fast-growing roots depend on favorable thermal conditions throughout their compressed development cycle. Leaving radishes in the ground beyond their optimal harvest window results in spongy or woody roots, emphasizing the critical timing between planting and harvest. The rapid growth cycle compresses all development stages into this narrow thermal window. Peas demonstrate the flexibility within spring crop requirements. While pea seeds can germinate in soil temperatures as low as 45 degrees, planting within the optimal 65 degrees to 70 degrees range ensures stronger initial development and proper formation of nitrogen-fixing root nodules. Snap, snow, and shelling varieties all benefit from these warmer thermal conditions during establishment, though they can tolerate cooler starts better than most spring crops. Excessive moisture in colder soil leads to seed rot, making thermal timing important for successful germination. Spinach faces significant challenges when planted outside optimal thermal windows. These highly temperature-sensitive leaves bolt prematurely when exposed to excessive heat during their growth cycle, becoming unpalatable once flowering begins. Spinach requires soil temperatures within the 65 degree to 70 degree range for best results, and must complete development before summer heat stress triggers reproductive phases. While not impossible to grow in warmer conditions, the quality and harvest window becomes severely compromised. Arugula operates under similar thermal preferences as spinach. These peppery greens perform best in cool conditions and become stressed by late spring or summer heat, making early spring planting optimal for quality harvests. Missing the ideal soil temperature window means accepting reduced quality and shorter harvest periods. The leaves develop their characteristic flavor profile most effectively when grown under proper thermal conditions throughout the growth cycle. Asian greens like tatsoi require precise temperature timing to develop properly before summer heat. Stress compromises quality. These brassica family members share thermal sensitivities with other cool season crops. Tatsoi forms distinctive rosettes of dark green leaves most effectively when planted within optimal soil temperature ranges. Heat exposure during development causes premature flowering and bitter flavors that reduce crop quality significantly. Brassicas, including kale, collards, and bok choy, benefit from precise temperature timing to develop properly before summer conditions become challenging. These leafy vegetables can be harvested as baby greens within 1 month of sowing when planted under optimal thermal conditions. Kale develops its characteristic curled leaves through proper temperature exposure during early growth phases. Collards form large, smooth leaves that thrive under consistent cool season conditions. Bok choy creates its signature white stems and dark green leaves most effectively when thermal requirements are met during establishment. The small brassica seeds perform best when sown with precision tools or scattered lightly across prepared ground. Soil coverage of 1/4 to 1/2 inch provides optimal germination conditions when combined with proper thermal ranges. These crops must establish and mature before summer temperatures trigger bolting and compromise harvest quality. Baby greens across all 15 varieties can be harvested within weeks of germination when planted at optimal soil temperatures. This accelerated harvest window depends on hitting favorable thermal conditions during initial planting. The cellular development that produces tender, flavorful leaves occurs most efficiently under specific temperature conditions that become increasingly difficult to maintain later in the season. Commercial growing operations treat these 15 varieties as a synchronized planting system rather than individual crops. Professional growers deploy all varieties when soil reaches the critical 65-degree threshold, maximizing harvest potential across the entire spring crop rotation while ensuring optimal growing conditions for each variety. The biological programming of these spring crops reflects thousands of years of evolution within specific environmental conditions. Each variety has adapted to germinate and mature during particular thermal windows. Modern agriculture has identified these precise requirements, allowing growers to optimize planting timing for maximum productivity and quality. These 15 varieties represent your primary spring harvest opportunity compressed into a critical planting window. Each day of delay reduces harvest quality and increases the risk of heat stress compromising development. The synchronized timing creates both maximum opportunity and significant risk. Success requires capturing the optimal thermal moment when soil conditions align perfectly. Understanding why this thermal precision matters requires examining what happens inside each seed when temperatures fall below these critical thresholds. Seeds planted in soil below 65-degree face systematic failure through multiple destructive pathways that compound each other's effects. The enzymes responsible for breaking down stored nutrients and initiating root development remain inactive, while harmful bacteria and fungi begin colonizing the seed coat. This creates a race between germination and decay, where destructive pathogens multiply rapidly in cool, moist conditions that inhibit beneficial growth processes. At suboptimal temperatures, the seed's protective mechanisms start failing as cell membranes lose their ability to control what substances enter and exit cellular compartments. Cool temperatures cause these protective barriers to weaken, creating entry points where soil-borne fungi and bacteria can penetrate through microscopic pores in the seed coat. Once pathogens breach these natural defenses, they establish colonies that consume stored nutrients before germination can begin. Research demonstrates that seeds exposed to temperatures below the optimal threshold develop malformed root systems with severely reduced nutrient uptake capacity. Even if these compromised seeds eventually germinate, the resulting plants remain stunted with inadequate root branching patterns and insufficient surface area for efficient resource absorption. This initial cellular damage during germination creates permanent developmental deficiencies that cannot be corrected later in the growing season. Water absorption becomes erratic in cool soil conditions, causing seeds to swell unevenly and crack under physical stress. This differential expansion splits the protective outer layers, exposing vulnerable internal tissues directly to soil-borne diseases. The process normally occurs at steady rates under optimal conditions, but cool temperatures create uneven moisture penetration that compromises the seed's structural integrity. The metabolic processes that should fuel rapid growth instead consume stored energy reserves without producing viable plant tissue. Seeds contain finite energy stores accumulated during their formation, and suboptimal temperatures cause these reserves to be depleted inefficiently. Energy expenditure exceeds productive output, gradually exhausting the seed's survival capacity while beneficial growth processes remain dormant. Temperature-induced damage accumulates progressively over time, creating increasingly worse conditions for seed survival. Each day of exposure to suboptimal temperatures increases pathogen colonization, while cellular deterioration spreads throughout the seed structure. The seed's internal environment becomes increasingly hostile to germination as protective mechanisms continue failing and harmful microorganisms multiply. Even seeds that manage to germinate in cool soil face severe limitations throughout their development cycle. The compromised plants struggle to compete with weeds, resist diseases, and respond to changing environmental conditions. Root systems established under suboptimal conditions lack the density and absorptive capacity needed for vigorous plant growth, making these plants vulnerable to stress throughout the growing season. The timing of cellular breakdown follows predictable patterns based on temperature exposure duration and severity. Seeds can survive brief periods at suboptimal temperatures without permanent damage, but extended exposure ensures complete failure. The biological machinery has limited tolerance for thermal stress, with critical systems shutting down permanently after prolonged operation outside optimal parameters. This cellular breakdown explains why delayed planting results in complete harvest failure rather than simply late harvests. The biological processes cannot restart once they begin failing in suboptimal conditions, unlike mechanical systems that can be repaired or reset. Biological systems cannot recover from thermal damage to essential cellular components. The race between germination and decay intensifies as soil temperatures remain below optimal ranges. Pathogenic microorganisms thrive in the exact conditions that inhibit seed germination, cool and moist environments where beneficial growth processes remain inactive. These organisms multiply rapidly while seeds remain vulnerable, creating increasingly unfavorable conditions for successful plant establishment. Understanding this cellular breakdown reveals why temperature precision matters more than traditional timing methods based on calendar schedules or weather patterns. The biological processes governing germination operate according to thermal thresholds rather than arbitrary dates. Seeds planted before soil reaches optimal temperatures face systematic cellular failure that guarantees crop loss regardless of subsequent growing conditions. The longer seeds remain in suboptimal soil, the more likely decay processes will overwhelm their natural defenses. This biological reality creates an unforgiving deadline where success depends entirely on hitting precise thermal targets. Missing these temperature requirements eliminates any possibility of successful germination and plant establishment. However, seeds planted at the exact moment when soil reaches optimal temperature unlock an entirely different biological response, one that transforms the growing timeline from months to mere weeks. When soil reaches exactly 65 degrees, the fastest maturing varieties begin precisely timed biological countdowns that deliver fresh produce within weeks rather than months. This accelerated growth cycle requires perfect conditions from day one. Any disruption in temperature, moisture, or nutrients extends the timeline beyond the safe harvest window before summer heat destroys crop viability. Radishes planted at optimal soil temperature complete root development in 18 to 25 days, but only if temperatures remain stable throughout the growth cycle. These remarkably fast-growing crops convert from seed to harvestable root vegetables faster than any other garden crop. The entire plant becomes edible during this rapid development phase. Roots, leaves, and even seed pods provide nutritional value. Harvesting must occur immediately upon maturity to prevent the characteristic spongy or woody texture that develops when radishes remain in the ground beyond their optimal harvest window. The cellular machinery driving radish development operates like precision manufacturing equipment during this 3-week window. Root expansion occurs through rapid cell division that requires consistent thermal conditions to maintain quality. Temperature fluctuations during the growth cycle disrupt cellular development patterns, creating irregular root shapes and compromised texture. The biological timer controlling radish maturation cannot be adjusted or extended once the germination process begins at optimal soil temperatures. Lettuce varieties can produce harvestable leaves in 25 to 30 days when planted at the thermal threshold, providing the season's first fresh greens. Leaf lettuce varieties mature faster than head-forming types, delivering cutting-size leaves within this optimal harvest window. The rapid growth cycle depends entirely on maintaining consistent soil temperatures during the critical establishment period. Lettuce planted outside the thermal window faces extended development times that push harvest dates into summer heat stress period. Succession planting strategies maximize lettuce production by sowing small quantities every 2 weeks throughout the spring window. This approach leverages the rapid 25 to 30-day development cycle to ensure continuous harvests before summer heat triggers bolting. Each successive planting must occur while soil temperatures remain within the optimal range for germination. The succession planting method creates a production system that delivers fresh lettuce throughout the entire spring growing season, effectively extending your harvest window from weeks to months. Baby spinach and arugula reach cutting size in 21-28 days, but require consistent soil temperatures to maintain rapid leaf production. These leafy greens operate under the same thermal constraints as other spring varieties, while offering even faster harvest potential. The cut-and-come-again growth habit allows multiple harvests from single plantings when thermal conditions remain favorable. Young leaves develop their characteristic flavors only when grown under optimal temperature conditions throughout the development cycle. Brassica vegetables, including kale, collards, tatsoi, busts, and bok choy, provide initial harvests within approximately 1 month of sowing when planted at optimal thermal conditions. The cut-and-come-again growth pattern allows harvesting a few leaves from each plant every few days, while the plant continues producing new growth. This harvesting method maximizes productivity within the narrow spring growing window. Baby kale leaves harvested within the first month provide tender salad material before the plants develop tougher, mature leaf structure. The key advantage of this timing centers on harvesting before summer heat, triggers bolting, flowering, and bitter flavors that ruin crop quality. Cool season varieties like lettuce, spinach, and arugula are particularly susceptible to these temperature-induced changes. These crops undergo irreversible physiological changes when exposed to warm temperatures during their growth cycle. Bolting transforms leafy vegetables into inedible flowering plants within days of heat exposure. The rapid harvest cycle ensures crop maturity occurs before thermal stress can trigger these destructive reproductive phases. Temperature-induced bolting affects spring varieties when planted outside the optimal thermal window. Though sensitivity varies by crop type, the biological switches controlling reproductive phases activate based on thermal exposure rather than plant maturity or development stage. Seeds planted in suboptimal soil temperatures face extended development periods that push harvest dates into summer thermal stress zones. This timing mismatch guarantees crop failure through premature flowering and flavor deterioration. Each variety follows a predetermined growth schedule that cannot be accelerated through fertilizers or intensive care. Once established, the biological programming controlling development rates operates independently of external inputs beyond optimal thermal conditions. Fertilizer applications cannot compensate for suboptimal soil temperatures or extended development periods. The genetic programming of spring varieties locks their growth rates into fixed patterns that respond only to thermal activation at planting. Commercial agricultural operations rely on this precise timing to maximize spring crop productivity across large acreages. Professional growers synchronize planting operations with soil temperature readings rather than calendar dates or weather forecasts. The economic success of commercial spring production depends entirely on capturing this narrow harvest window before summer conditions eliminate crop viability. This rapid harvest potential represents your earliest possible yield and the foundation for succession planting throughout spring. The compressed timeline creates both maximum opportunity and maximum risk, requiring precise execution to capture the full production potential of these fast-maturing varieties. However, if your soil thermometer currently reads below the critical 65 degree hours threshold, specific techniques can still create the thermal conditions these seeds require for successful germination. Professional growers use targeted soil warming methods to extend planting windows and ensure optimal germination even when natural conditions haven't arrived. These techniques require immediate implementation and precise execution. Waiting another week reduces their effectiveness significantly as ambient temperatures continue rising and the optimal intervention window narrows. Row covers and low tunnels function like agricultural greenhouses, trapping solar radiation and creating microclimates that can significantly raise soil temperature above ambient conditions. These protective structures shield the soil surface from cooling winds and nighttime heat loss while allowing maximum solar penetration during daylight hours. The thermal elevation they provide transforms marginally cool soil into optimal germination zones that reach the critical threshold days or weeks ahead of natural warming cycles. The installation process requires anchoring lightweight fabric or plastic covers over prepared seed beds using metal hoops or wooden frames. These covers remain in place throughout the germination period, creating stable thermal environments that protect emerging seedlings from temperature fluctuations. Professional growers monitor internal temperatures daily to prevent overheating during warm afternoons while maintaining optimal conditions for consistent growth. Black plastic mulch operates as a solar heat collector, absorbing daytime radiation and storing thermal energy that releases gradually throughout cooler, nighttime periods. The dark surface material captures wavelengths across the solar spectrum, converting light energy into heat that penetrates the soil beneath. This process creates consistent temperature elevation that maintains optimal germination conditions around the clock rather than just during peak sunlight hours. Commercial operations deploy black plastic mulch across entire field sections, securing the material with soil or weighted edges to prevent wind displacement. The thermal effect continues working throughout the growing season, maintaining soil temperatures within optimal ranges, even during brief, cool weather periods. This technique proves especially valuable for extending the planting season at both ends of the thermal window. Raised beds warm faster than ground-level soil due to increased surface area exposure and improved drainage characteristics, often reaching optimal temperatures several days earlier than conventional planting areas. The elevated design exposes soil to solar radiation from multiple angles throughout the day, while enhanced drainage prevents waterlogging that retards thermal warming. Additional soil volume above ground level creates thermal mass that stores and releases heat more efficiently than flat garden surfaces. Construction details determine thermal performance in raised bed systems. Beds positioned with southern exposure capture maximum solar energy, while proper soil composition ensures optimal heat retention and distribution. The contained soil environment allows precise control over moisture levels that complement thermal management for ideal germination conditions. Cold frames provide controlled environments where soil temperature monitoring and adjustment occur through ventilation management and thermal mass integration. These structures function as precision thermal control systems with adjustable tops that regulate internal temperatures based on external conditions and plant requirements. Thermal mass materials like rocks or water containers store daytime heat and release it gradually during cooler periods. The operational protocol involves daily temperature monitoring and ventilation adjustment to maintain optimal soil conditions. Opening the frame during warm afternoons prevents overheating, while closing it during cool evenings preserves accumulated thermal energy. This active management approach ensures soil temperatures remain within the narrow, optimal range required for successful germination. Container planting allows complete control over soil temperature by enabling plant relocation to optimal microclimates and accommodating supplemental heating systems when necessary. Mobile growing systems can move to southern exposures during cool periods or shaded areas during excessive heat. Heat mats provide precise bottom heating that warms soil to exact temperatures regardless of ambient conditions. Container selection influences thermal performance significantly. Dark-colored containers absorb more solar radiation, while larger volumes provide thermal mass that moderates temperature swings. Professional growing operations use standardized container systems with integrated temperature monitoring to maintain optimal conditions throughout the germination period. Heat mats operate like precision industrial heating elements, providing controlled bottom heat that warms soil from below while maintaining surface temperatures within optimal ranges. These electrical devices include thermostats that maintain exact soil temperatures regardless of external weather conditions. The controlled heating eliminates guesswork and ensures consistent germination conditions. Each method creates the precise thermal conditions these seeds evolve to require for successful germination and rapid growth. The artificial thermal environments replicate optimal natural conditions that trigger the enzymatic processes essential for seed activation. Professional implementation of these backup strategies requires understanding the thermal requirements of each specific variety and matching heating methods to those precise specifications. Timing becomes critical when implementing backup strategies during the narrow window when soil temperatures remain below optimal but continue rising toward the threshold. Early intervention provides maximum benefit, while delayed implementation reduces effectiveness as natural conditions approach optimal ranges. The investment in thermal management equipment pays dividends through extended planting seasons and improved germination success rates. These backup strategies can salvage your spring planting window, but require immediate action while soil temperatures are still rising. However, consistently hitting these critical thermal thresholds each season requires understanding and manipulating the factors that control soil temperature throughout the year. Professional agricultural operations treat soil temperature as a manageable resource rather than a variable beyond their control. Most gardeners remain at the mercy of weather patterns because they haven't implemented the infrastructure needed for thermal control. This fundamental difference separates commercial success from backyard disappointment when critical planting windows arrive each spring. Soil organic matter acts as natural insulation, moderating temperature swings and helping soil reach optimal ranges more predictably each season. The decomposed plant material creates microscopic air pockets that buffer soil from extreme temperature fluctuations while maintaining moisture levels that support consistent growing conditions. Organic matter improves soil structure, creating an environment where seeds can establish successfully when thermal conditions align properly. Compost integration transforms soil thermal properties over multiple growing seasons through continuous organic matter additions. Each application increases the soil's capacity to moderate temperature extremes while improving overall stability. The biological activity within organic-rich soil supports healthy microbial communities that enhance soil structure and create optimal conditions for seed germination when temperatures reach the critical threshold. Proper drainage prevents waterlogged conditions that keep soil temperatures cool well into the growing season. Saturated soil requires significantly more energy to warm because excess water creates thermal barriers that prevent soil from reaching optimal germination temperatures. Drainage systems remove excess moisture that would otherwise delay spring warming by weeks during crucial planting windows. French drain installations along planting areas channel excess water away from critical growing zones during spring warming periods. These subsurface drainage systems prevent waterlogging that can significantly delay soil warming during crucial planting windows. Well-drained soil warms faster and maintains more consistent temperatures throughout the root zone, where seeds require stable thermal conditions for successful germination. Strategic placement of thermal mass elements like rocks or water containers near planting areas can help moderate soil temperatures and extend optimal growing conditions. Dark-colored materials absorb solar radiation throughout daylight hours, creating warm microclimates that support consistent growing conditions. These elements work throughout the growing season, helping maintain soil temperatures within favorable ranges, even during brief cool weather periods. Cover cropping during winter protects soil structure and adds organic matter that improves overall soil health for spring planting. Winter cover crops prevent soil compaction from freeze-thaw cycles that damage soil structure and reduce the soil's ability to warm effectively in spring. The root systems of cover crops create channels that improve both drainage and air movement when spring warming begins. Leguminous cover crops provide nitrogen fixation benefits while contributing organic matter that enhances soil structure and health. These plants establish extensive root networks that create permanent channels for improved water movement and air circulation through the soil profile. Cover crop biomass decomposes into organic matter that provides long-term soil health benefits essential for optimal spring growing conditions. Soil testing reveals compaction issues that prevent proper heat penetration and water movement, both critical for reaching thermal thresholds. Compacted soil layers create barriers that prevent heat from penetrating to seed depth where germination occurs. Identifying and addressing compaction problems ensures soil can warm effectively when spring conditions arrive. Soil structure improvements through mechanical aeration create pathways for better air and water movement throughout the growing medium. Breaking through compacted layers improves overall soil porosity and allows more efficient thermal warming. Organic amendments incorporated during soil preparation enhance structure while providing long-term improvements that support successful seed establishment. Installing permanent raised bed systems with quality soil amendments creates consistent growing conditions year after year. Raised bed construction provides elevated growing surfaces that receive enhanced solar exposure and drain more effectively than ground-level plantings. The contained soil environment allows precise control over soil composition, drainage, and growing conditions that support reliable spring planting success. Quality soil amendments integrated during bed construction establish optimal growing conditions that persist across multiple growing seasons. Well-prepared raised beds warm faster in spring due to improved drainage and elevated positioning that captures more solar energy throughout the day. These permanent installations create predictable growing environments that respond consistently to seasonal temperature changes. These long-term investments ensure you never miss another critical planting window due to poor soil conditions. Building proper soil management into your growing system transforms unreliable spring conditions into predictable planting opportunities. However, even with optimal soil preparation, the biological reality of these spring varieties creates consequences that extend far beyond a single growing season. These 15 critical varieties operate on annual cycles that cannot be rushed, delayed, or repeated within the same growing season. Climate patterns and seasonal timing create only one optimal planting window per year for these specific crops. The biological programming embedded within each seed variety locks them into precise seasonal cycles that have evolved over millions of years to align with natural environmental patterns. Summer heat stress makes successful germination extremely challenging for cool season varieties, creating significant obstacles for late season planting of most spring crops. Soil temperatures during summer months exceed the thermal tolerance thresholds of these temperature-sensitive seeds. The enzymatic processes that should trigger germination become severely compromised when exposed to excessive heat. Seeds planted during summer conditions face systematic cellular breakdown as high temperatures disrupt the proteins essential for germination. The metabolic machinery within cool season seeds struggles to operate under thermal stress conditions that exceed their evolutionary adaptations. The physiological stress responses triggered by excessive heat create multiple failures throughout the germination process. Cell membranes lose structural integrity when exposed to temperatures above optimal ranges, allowing harmful substances to penetrate seed tissues. Water uptake becomes erratic and destructive rather than beneficial, causing seeds to desiccate or rot before establishing viable root systems. Heat-stressed seeds that attempt germination typically produce malformed seedlings with severely compromised survival capacity. Fall planting presents different challenges, including shorter day lengths, declining soil temperatures, and early frost risks that significantly reduce harvest potential. The photoperiod triggers reproductive responses in cool season crops that interfere with proper vegetative development. Diminishing daylight hours activate flowering mechanisms prematurely, causing plants to bolt before producing harvestable leaves or roots. Declining soil temperatures during autumn prevent the rapid growth cycles these varieties require for maturation within safe harvest windows. Early frost events during fall growing seasons destroy tender plant tissues before crops reach maturity. The cellular damage from freezing temperatures proves irreversible for these delicate varieties. Unlike perennial plants adapted for frost tolerance, annual spring crops lack the biological mechanisms needed to survive freezing conditions. Fall-planted crops face the challenging task of establishing and maturing during declining environmental conditions. Winter conditions in most regions make outdoor seed starting extremely difficult for these temperature-sensitive varieties. Frozen soil prevents germination activity as cellular processes cease functioning at temperatures near freezing. Snow cover and ice formation create physical barriers that prevent seed-to-soil contact necessary for successful establishment. The absence of adequate thermal energy during winter months renders outdoor growing nearly impossible for cool season annual crops. Indoor winter growing requires artificial lighting and heating systems that replicate spring conditions, but these controlled environments cannot fully duplicate the complex soil ecosystems these varieties prefer. The symbiotic relationships between seeds, soil microorganisms, and beneficial fungi depend on natural soil conditions that prove challenging to replicate in artificial growing systems. Transplanting seedlings from indoor environments to outdoor conditions often creates transplant shock that reduces survival rates significantly. Next year's spring window depends on weather patterns, soil conditions, and seasonal timing that vary considerably from year to year. Meteorological systems operate according to complex atmospheric interactions that create dramatic variation annually. The precise combination of temperature, moisture, and timing required for optimal planting conditions represents a convergence of multiple environmental factors that occur with natural variability. Climate variability means that missing this year's opportunity doesn't guarantee identical conditions will return at the same time next year. Spring conditions can arrive weeks earlier or later than average, depending on broader climatic influences like ocean temperature patterns and atmospheric circulation changes. The thermal threshold timing shifts based on these large-scale climate drivers that operate on irregular cycles. Soil conditions contribute additional variables that affect optimal planting timing beyond simple temperature measurements. Moisture levels, organic matter content, and soil structure all influence how quickly soil reaches optimal thermal ranges each spring. These soil characteristics change gradually over time through natural processes and human management practices. The interaction between soil properties and weather patterns creates unique conditions each growing season. Each growing season represents a unique combination of temperature, moisture, and timing that may not repeat for several years. The convergence of optimal conditions requires multiple environmental factors to align simultaneously within narrow tolerance ranges. Historical weather patterns reveal that perfect growing conditions occur irregularly rather than following predictable annual schedules. Some years provide extended optimal windows, while others offer only brief opportunities for successful planting. This creates genuine urgency around the current planting window. Missing this year's optimal conditions means waiting for next year's potentially different and less favorable circumstances. The mathematical probability of optimal conditions repeating with identical timing remains low due to the multiple variables that must align simultaneously. Missing the current window eliminates not only immediate harvest potential, but also the certainty of comparable opportunities in the immediate future. Understanding this biological reality transforms the current thermal threshold from a simple planting guideline into a critical action trigger that demands immediate response when conditions align properly. Commercial growers adhere to a strict soil temperature threshold of 65 degrees as a non-negotiable trigger for immediate seed deployment across their entire spring crop rotation. Amateur gardeners often delay action, waiting for perfect conditions, while professionals understand that meeting the thermal threshold is the only perfect condition that matters. This fundamental difference separates successful commercial operations from backyard disappointments when critical planting windows arrive each spring. Professional agriculture relies on soil temperature data rather than calendar dates or general weather forecasts, recognizing that thermal conditions determine biological success regardless of traditional planting schedules. Purchase a reliable soil thermometer and take readings at seed depth, typically 2-4 inches, at the same time each morning for 3 consecutive days. The consistency of timing eliminates variables that could distort temperature readings and provides accurate data for deployment decisions. Digital thermometers with probe extensions offer superior accuracy compared to traditional dial models that rely on surface contact measurements. The probe length ensures readings occur at the precise depth where seeds will germinate, rather than surface temperatures that fluctuate dramatically throughout daily cycles. Morning temperature readings provide the most stable thermal data because soil temperatures reach their daily minimum during pre-dawn hours. Afternoon readings can be misleadingly high due to solar heating, while evening measurements fail to account for overnight cooling pattern. The 3-day monitoring period confirms thermal stability rather than temporary temperature spikes that could trigger premature planting decisions. Professional operations often extend monitoring to 5 consecutive days when weather patterns show unusual volatility. The research confirms that soil should warm to at least 65 to 70 degrees Celsius, typically occurring about 2 weeks after the last frost date, providing a reliable thermal benchmark for deployment timing. Prepare seed beds in advance with proper soil amendments, drainage, and row marking so planting can begin immediately when temperatures reach threshold. This advanced preparation eliminates delays that could cost critical planting opportunities during narrow thermal windows that define spring crop success. Soil amendments require time to integrate properly with existing soil structure before optimal planting conditions arrive. Drainage improvements cannot be implemented effectively once soil temperatures indicate immediate planting readiness. The connection between proper preparation and narrow optimal planting windows becomes critical when thermal conditions align for only brief periods each season. Row marking systems using stakes and string create precise planting patterns that allow rapid seed deployment without field layout delays. Professional operations prepare detailed planting maps that specify seed spacing, row orientation, and varietal placement for each growing area. The preparation phase includes soil testing to verify pH levels and nutrient availability that support rapid germination once thermal conditions align. Mechanical cultivation creates optimal seedbed texture that facilitates quick planting operations when temperature thresholds trigger deployment protocols. Pre-soak seeds for faster germination and have all planting tools, row covers, and irrigation systems ready for deployment within hours of reaching 65-degree varieties. Seed pre-soaking accelerates the imbibition process that initiates germination, reducing the time between planting and emergence when optimal soil conditions occur. Different varieties require specific soaking durations. Radish seeds need only 4 hours, while pea varieties benefit from overnight soaking periods. The soaking process must coordinate with temperature monitoring, so treated seeds deploy immediately when thermal thresholds align. Tool preparation includes cleaning and organizing all planting equipment to prevent contamination that could compromise germination success. Row covers must be sized, positioned, and secured in advance to protect planted areas from temperature fluctuations immediately following deployment. Irrigation systems require testing and calibration to ensure proper moisture delivery without disturbing newly planted seeds. Professional operations maintain dedicated planting tool sets that remain sterile and ready for immediate deployment throughout the thermal monitoring period. Document soil temperature readings, planting dates, and germination rates to build a database of thermal timing for your specific location and soil conditions. This documentation creates location-specific thermal profiles that improve planting precision in subsequent growing seasons. Temperature data reveals microclimate variations across different garden areas that influence optimal planting timing. Germination rate tracking identifies which varieties respond most successfully to specific thermal conditions in your soil environment. The database development requires standardized recording formats that capture temperature readings, weather conditions, soil moisture levels, and varietal performance data. Professional growers use this information to refine planting protocols and optimize thermal timing for maximum germination success. Long-term data collection reveals climate patterns and thermal trends that affect seasonal planting windows. Implement succession planting schedules based on thermal windows rather than calendar dates to maximize harvest potential throughout the spring season. Traditional calendar-based planting ignores thermal realities that determine actual growing conditions each year. Thermal-based succession planting ensures each planting cycle occurs under optimal soil conditions rather than arbitrary time intervals. Monitor weather forecasts for temperature drops that might require protective measures to maintain soil warmth after planting. Professional operations track extended weather forecasts to anticipate cold fronts that could compromise recently planted seed. Row cover deployment must occur immediately when forecast data indicates potential temperature drops below optimal ranges. This professional approach eliminates guesswork and ensures you capture every available day of optimal growing conditions. The systematic methodology transforms planting from seasonal guessing into precision agricultural timing based on measurable thermal data. Success depends entirely on recognizing the critical thermal moment and responding with immediate action. The thermal data you collect transforms planting from seasonal guesswork into precision agricultural timing that delivers consistent results year after year. This 65-degree threshold represents the difference between a productive spring garden and a season of missed opportunities that won't return until next year's conditions arrive. The precise temperature activates enzymatic machinery that transforms dormant seeds into thriving plants within weeks rather than months. Check your soil temperature today. Prepare your seeds and tools tonight and be ready to plant the moment the thermometer reads 65 degrees. Your spring harvest depends not on calendar dates or weather forecasts, but on recognizing and acting upon this critical thermal moment when optimal growing conditions align.